Hello and welcome to my channel. I hope all are keeping fine. And today we are going to discuss about the functions or methods in Java. Okay. Now let's see what is function and what is method. Now before we start with the function and method, we should also discuss, you should know something about the class. So what is a class? A class is defined as a blueprint of objects. Why it is called blueprint? Because using an existing class, the new objects can be easily created, having the similar states and similar behavior. That's why it is called a blueprint of objects. Now it acts as an object factory. It acts as an object factory. The objects that will possess similar states and similar behavior. A class is an abstraction of software object because it represents all the objects that are inside its body by its name. So it is in the abstract form. Actually, the class itself is nothing, a name only, a symbolic name, a name given. But actually they exist, the class exists because of the objects which are inside it, the functions that we create. Okay. Now it cannot exist without the objects that it contains, and the objects cannot exist outside the class. So object and class are related to each other. They are dependent on each other for their existence. So a class cannot exist without objects. So objects has to be there in order to make a class. And again, an object cannot exist outside the class. Outside the class, object cannot be created. It has to be created inside the class only. So therefore, user-defined functions are referred as in objects in a class. So user-defined function, whatever function we create, they are referred as the objects in a class. Okay. Now we move on to functions. Now we should understand what is a function. Function is simple. It's a sub-program that makes a part of a working unit of a class that will actually work, that actually does the task what is required in the class. So a subprogram that makes a part of a working unit of a class is called function. Function is the actually working part of the software object. It contains all the smaller to smallest tokens required for completing a task of reading data from user or accepting data from user, processing it, and then displaying the result on the output terminal window. Remember, the output is displayed in the terminal window. One function is responsible for performing only one behavior out of many in a class. There may be many functions, all specialize in doing different functions, different behaviors, and all of them can be the part of the same class. So one function is responsible for performing only one behavior, one set of behavior, or one particular behavior for which it is written in a class. So functions are also called methods. So remember, the functions that we create are also called methods. Now there are 5 types of functions. When we talk about the functions, there are 5 different types of functions. The first one is user-defined function. Second, number 2, library function. Number 3, constructor function. Number 4, destructor function. Number 5, interface functions. Now let's see one by one. The first one, user-defined function. The working function that we define and create that contains declarations, expressions, statements, conditions, iterations, etc. for a particular task. So user-defined function is a function that we create, that we define for performing the work, for performing a particular task. And it contains what? It contains declarations of variables, array, or different elements. And it will have expressions, formulas and expressions. It will have statements, conditions and iterations and so on. It can be big or compact. A function can be a big, a long, or can be a compact. Depends on the task as well as the individuality of a programmer. It also depends on the individual thinking and logic of a programmer who can lay out or who can put the commands in accordance with the task in a shortcut way or in a longer way. Little longer way or can be a little shorter way. So it can be big or it can be compact. Now let's see. It can be of two types of functions. These functions are of two types. The first one is called user-defined functions are of two types. The first one is called pure function or pure method. Technically it is called as accessor method. The second one is called impure function or method. Technically it is called as mutator method. So these two are two different types of user-defined functions. Now let's see the other part about pure and impure function. Now when you talk about pure function, it is called accessor method, and you can look at the example. A program is given there. You can see public, and in the bracket you can see byte, short, int, long, float, character. All these are primitive data types. So a function return type can be any of the primitive type, any one of the primitive type, depending on the kind of output that is going to be returned to the caller or to display on the terminal. Then function name is given, calculate. Inside the bracket you can see the parameter list variables that will take the value from outside and use it inside the function. In a place of formula, there a formula is to be placed, calculation will take place, and the answer is returned back to the caller. But the answer should be according to the data type that is given in the function declaration. Okay, function definition. So this is the pure function. So pure function will use a return statement. It will not have any other statement to show the answer. Return statement, and only one answer is returned back to the caller. And one advantage of this pure function is that you can call this directly, this function, inside a formula to further continue the processing of numbers. Okay. Now the next one, impure function, or called mutator method. Why it is called mutator? Because it will alter or change the sequence of the output. Okay, alters or changes the sequence or state of the data that is given inside. That means it will produce answer not in one line, it will produce answer in multiple lines. There can be more than one answer from a single function. And remember, the mutator method or impure function has void return type. Always it has got void, V-O-I-D, void return type. It never uses any of the primitive data type return type. It will have only void. Function name followed by the same rule, parameter list to accept the value from outside, and inside the body to calculate and process and display the answer using system out println only. It does not use return statement. It uses only system out println statement. Now next, library functions. So library functions are ready-made functions which are available in Java language package to carry out different types of calculation work, manipulation tasks. They are of different types as follows. Number one, you can see math function is meant for mathematical calculations of numbers. It's got trigonometric functions. They are used for trigonometric calculation of values. Then it's got string functions for handling or manipulating the text-based data information. Next one, character functions used for working character literals and manipulation of character literals. And then it's got wrapper functions which are meant for converting our data type, a string data type into other types. No, maybe like character or maybe integer, float, byte, long, short, double, any kind we can convert it using the wrapper class. Now the advantage of library function, they save our coding time and make programming easy, because once a function is available we don't have to write codes for that. Instead we can just call the function ready-made from Java language package and we can call them and put the value inside the bracket, put the parameters, put the argument value to any variable that is defined and get the answer easily through the library functions. Okay. Now next one. Next we have constructor functions. So constructor function is a very special kind of function created in a class, especially to initialize the class variables with a value other than default values. What is default value? The value which is accepted automatically by a variable, that are called default value. And what are default values? If it is byte type data, it is 0. If it is short, it is 0. If it is int, 0. And if it is long, it is 0L. If it is float, it is 0.0f. If it is double, it is 0.0d. If it is character, it is null. If it is string, it is null. If it is boolean, it is false. Okay. So these are the default values. So it will, if you want to initialize the class variables which are shared in all the multiple functions other than default value, then we can use a constructor. The class variable play a very important role as they are used and accessible to all the member functions of the class. So all the particular variable that is initialized through constructor, they can be visible, that variable or those variables can be visible in all the functions of the class, and they are shared. They play very important role. They play very important role in the processing inside the class. Constructors are generally declared just after class declaration. Okay, constructors are generally declared just after class declaration. Okay, so class variable declarations to initialize them directly or using parameter variable. So class variables can be declared and initialized directly, or they can be initialized using the parameter variable through a constructor. As the object caller feeds the value at the initial stage of execution of the program will continue processing. That means the user has to invoke the class, and as you invoke the class, constructor will start its work first. And the first work that it will do is, according to the parameter, it will ask you to enter the value to initialize the class variable. And once the class variable is initialized, it will continue the processing of the program. Constructor name and class name must be exactly same, because constructor is the key function that executes first before any other function of the class. So constructor function is executed first before executing any function in the class. Now the next function is called Destructor function. So Destructor functions are inbuilt inside the Java that clears the memory blocks as soon as the execution or processing of a program is completed. Hence, it prepares space for upcoming new sets of data for other program or so on. So it will create this space memory block. Once the work is over, it will clean up and prepare space for the new set of data coming up in the memory, the new codes, the new program is coming up in the memory for further working. Okay. So constructor function is to initiate life in a variable. So what it does, constructor function will initiate a start, give a life to a variable by storing the working value. By storing the working value. What is working value? The starting value. Like for example, the rate of a ticket, the price of a ticket, the cost of a ticket, or unit cost of something that you're selling. No? Or starting value of total collection, 0. No? Or by default, something has to be true, isn't it? So that can be already set by true. By default is false, but you can set as true. Now, in order to make those things, we have to use constructor. So, constructor function is to initiate the life in a variable by storing working values. The variable remains alive as long as it plays an important role in a program. So, the variable will be alive because it is carrying a value which is shared by functions. So, therefore, it remains alive as long as its work is continued in the program. As soon as the variable disposes its value for the last time at the end of the program block, as soon as it will last, extreme last end of the program, the last value of the variable is displayed or transferred to somewhere or executed or processed. After that, the destructor will take over the job and destroy the variable or erase the variable value from the memory because that is no more required. Answer is obtained, the value is no more required. It is displayed already, no more required. So it will clear up from the memory. Okay. Now the fifth one, the next function is called interface function. So practically we have been using very minimal of this interface function, but there is something called interface function in the Java program, and this interface function is different than all the functions so far discussed. It contains only the function call statements, nothing more than that. So we can say it acts as a switchboard in a program to call the functions in the right sequence to execute them. Okay. So it's got sequential function calling only inside the body of interface function. Okay. So we wind up to here. Next video we'll be discussing more on something very important related to this functions, which are the part of the functions, play a very important role in all these functions and in the class. So we'll discuss. Stay tuned and follow my channel. If you like the video, you click on like. If you think that is very important or you feel that is useful for you, your friends, no, you can share it, you can subscribe it, you can comment it. Looking forward for more useful things that is coming up for you, and keep watching, keep following my video. Follow my next video for more on Java at School, something more very important, relevant to your syllabus, relevant to your programming skills. Okay, so till then, bye bye and take care.